let's go for it. And what we'll do first is describe to us, if you guys brainstormed, or if you argued, or you brain hurricane, or you did any one of those. After which you then describe to us your thought process, or now you ultimately landed on either the one or two solutions that you selected.
Together we preferred a consensus solution.
All right.
Because the solution is that having looked at the problem and the report of the RCP audit, obviously has been a lot of wastages going on, not just in terms of environmental impact, but financially as well. And financially is, when we look at the audit report in terms of the estimated annual savings, put together all the elements that have been identified, we are looking at about 65 million naira saved annually, by the organization. This is quite a sum, to the bottom line. What we now did is, okay, fine. Look at the recommended equipment or devices that need to be procured in terms to so that to solve this problem. Now we quickly resorted to the two grade matrix, okay, and looking at, because obviously we want to do all this at a stretch or at a goal. We'll be laying out about 230 million. No matter how big the allocation is, that's quite some figure. So what we did, we prioritize in terms of looking at the ones with high costs and high impact on the organization, the ones with a high cost and low impact on the organization, and so forth. And from that, we agreed that the heat recovery system is of high impact, of high cost and of high impact. And then the water waste reuse, so equally of a high impact and high cost and high impact. The solar hybrid is of high cost but of low impact, and the speed motor is of low impact and low cost. And
why did we think?
I'm coming to that. Starting with the heat recovery.
Yeah.
The high impact is that it will reduce about 200 whatever heat emitted to the atmosphere,
yes.
And then we're going to be saving about 25 million naira estimatedly, and of course the high cost is at about 70 million to back that of 3 years payback period. Even though our lenders haven't told us the number of years we have as in terms of monetary, we're talking about payback period now.
Yeah.
Okay, so within 3 years, we should be able to pay back at least a lot of money too. That would be about close about 20 million per annum or more. Okay, so that's of high cost. Same goes with the water reuse, wastewater reuse system. Yeah. We understand that compliantly we will be seen as doing well, because we will not be polluting the environment. But hey, we're going to be laying out about 60 million for that, and we'll pay back over a 4-year period. So this informs that. But the one of the speed motor, we look at it as it's a hybrid thing. It's like a standby, so to speak. It has no immediate impact on the operations of the organization. So it's of low impact, and of course the cost is very minimal in terms of savings. Yeah, I think I'll just say it.
All right, thank you. So,
and in addition to what you said, look at the percentage. Okay, sorry. We look at the percentage of the savings. That is to say that the heat recovery and the wastewater reuse system has the higher rate of savings. They are at about 30% and the others are at about 20%. Then if you also consider corporate social responsibility, you will see that these two projects also would help in the environmental impact. Thank you.
With these few words of yours, you're able to convince and not to confuse us that heat recovery and wastewater use. Oh, in addition,
one of the reasons why we say that the solar hybrid system.
Please let me pass.
One of the reasons we say that the solar hybrid system, if you read the sentence very well, it says for lighting.
Oh, if I read it. Let me read it.
If you read the sentence very well, it says for lighting and admin. So automatically they are not doing it for the production area. So it's external. So we can find another alternative.
It doesn't matter. We can paste.
They don't use lighting.
Yeah.
No, because it's lighting. They say lighting.
Yeah, because we can just use cardboard.
Don't quote me. we are ranking these the ones that are more important.
Yeah, and that's the point he's making. He's saying that he's not saying this isn't important. He's doing a prioritization exercise. Meditating well enough. You see that they do not understand what I'm saying. But when they presented their solution, it was excellent. So to that end, I'm calling upon them again to deliver excellently, just like they did yesterday. All right.
It was more presenting different
views
on the same thing, because we all agreed about reducing.
Sorry, can you hear them?
No, you can't. Okay, sorry. We agreed that we need to reduce negative impact on the environment and save cost at the same time. So we looked at the best ways to apply it. So we saw everything, how much money will be saved and how much will be payback period and environmental impact.
Right.
Since we have an environmental manual, he explained that it's better to focus on the environment before thinking about saving money. For me, being the banker, we have to save money. Exactly. So we sort of nodded and decided to come up with two measures that I think can meet.
I like sustainability professionals right here, so we'll give you time to talk for a second.
Definitely.
So the banker.
So we looked at how much we spent. We chose which is what wastewater reuse and heat recovery for dying unit. These are the first.
Did you copy them?
No, we are independent thinkers.
Okay, great.
So we thought those two because again, if you look at how much you save, it's 43 million. The payback period.
How did you calculate your 43 million?
Oh, we
25 plus
18.
Exactly. No, you know some of us are not.
Oh, okay. Then the payback period in total is not more than 3.3 years, even though that's a strain compared to 5.5 or 3.8. It's still better in terms of how much money we can save. Then you look at the environmental impact, reduces wastewater use by 40%, reduces 200 CO emissions per year. These are some of the things that Nigeria is trying to get into and can present as forward thinking. And he also said,
Back of the industry.
so he also presented another side which then made everything concrete in the sense that if we focus on reducing the negative environmental impact, it also translates into like stronger cost reduction. What he said was that instead of pumping pumping 3 times per day, if we reduce our wastewater once every week, and that will save us the same amount of money to have, let's say, installing a solar. So these are the things we just had in mind and came up with those two. But he's the one.
Thank you. So let's allow the sustainability professional.
The negative impact on the environment,
Yeah.
just like you mentioned, instead of pumping water once every day, X volume of water, it can be recycled and it reduces the impact on the pumping machines, because it has to be maintained also when we wear and tear. Then, depending on the source of the water, is it boreholes or surface? It can be undermined, or is it surface water?
Yeah.
It can have a negative impact on the marine usage. So however you look at it, we'll be saving costs because estimated annual savings is 18 million.
Yeah.
When you look at it,
Yeah.
it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's the second estimated cost, 60 million. The banker, we did a little bit of jumping and we arrived at water reuse being the best to choose.
Right.
Did all the necessary things we could do. First of all, we try to understand the problem, profile solution to it, putting it into the 2x2 matrix of impact and cost. We put things together. We saw heat recovery, two major things: heat recovery and wastewater reuse, which was identified in the problem. So, looking at this situation now, a significant amount of wastewater and heat that has not been used, and linking that to our goal, the resource efficient and cleaner production. We see that something is not efficiently used, which is the wastewater, and the heat. So we look at the estimated capital expenses that is involved in carrying out this project. The first one, 70 million, and the third one, which is 60 million. If you add all of them together, it will give you around 100 and something, 30, thereabout. And looking at the payback period, we are putting all these things into consideration because these are the things you use to present your case. Like you said yesterday, it's not about those things, it's about how you present your case when you get into the room. So we look at all these things and put them in check. So if we achieve the heat recovery, it will save about 200 tons of the carbon footprint. Yes, so that's a massive one for the environmental sustainability. So also for the third one, wastewater reuse system, it will reduce 40% of the wastewater, the water use, which means we have saved 40% of what we are supposed to use annually. Carrying out these two projects gives us high impact. Although the first one is high cost, the second one, although we don't have a space for medium costs, so which will make us include that 60 million into high cost. But then if they were maybe the third matrix for medium cost, we would have positioned that into medium cost. So these two projects would really would suit well with this industry. Thank you.
This is a round of applause. You see, I told you that there are people that are matrix is just a framework that you can use to do your assessment. You can actually do a high, medium, low assessment and say, hey, we think that this strays more towards medium. We can't really call it low, we can't really call it high, and so we'll call it medium. And actually, you can still reflect it on the 2x2 matrix by putting it maybe on the dotted lines. Right, so it doesn't necessarily fall into high or medium. You can just write it over the dotted lines if you still want to use the 2x2 matrix to show medium impact. The other thing, sorry man, I'll continue. The other thing that I noticed is that you could not only use the 2x2 matrix, you also mentioned that you tied it back to the problem, right? We noticed that the problem is wastewater and heat, and that's what you're focusing on, and that's what drove the solutions that you ultimately landed on. Sorry, ma, you have the point.
Yes, we also, in 2 years, you can move to upgrade, that's this variable motor speed, by reducing your electricity. And in doing that, you are automatically cutting down the cost of diesel. Because once you start using motors that have VFDs, you understand, it will reduce your energy consumption. And sometimes energy, not sometimes, the energy consumption also depends, the consumption of your diesel depends on the load of your machine, which is electricity, and that load now boils down to the type of motors we are using. So we can start, this company can start with 1, move to 2, while impacting on the 4th one.
Right. Thank you. Are you an engineer? You might start impacting some other elements, within the organization. I'll release you in 1 minute. But I noticed that everybody that spoke about the 200, they will say 200 carbon, 200. The TCO2E seems like something people really are not familiar with, and it's not a problem. It just means tons of CO2 equivalent, not emissions. Equivalent, 200 tons of CO2 equivalent. The equivalent that you see in there speaks about the GHG sorry, one class. The equivalent, you will notice that most times when people talk about emissions, they always talk about carbon. However, the greenhouse gases go beyond carbon. There is methane, there is PAMA, that bros can help with some negative professionals. And so what happens is that the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has estimated that on an annual basis, we put up 50 billion tons of CO2 equivalent into the atmosphere. But in actual fact, carbon that is put into the atmosphere is about 35 million tons. What they've done is, rather than write different GHG types and tell you what the what they will say 33 million tons of carbon, 5 billion tons of methane, this billion tons of this other one. What they've done is to convert those other ones into the equivalent in carbon terms. It's why you would often see that they write TCO2 and they'll put a little E at the end. Sometimes though, what has been measured is, so this might just be carbon, for example, but it really doesn't matter, because if you say it's carbon equivalent, it's still carbon. So next time, when you see stuff like this, you will not say 200 emissions. You will say 200 tons of CO2 equivalent. With these few words of mine, the forestry person wants to talk.
We are dwelling on the water and heat recovery system installation. And I know the major problem of this company now is diesel consumption. If diesel consumption is being reduced, all of that thing will fall in place. And I heard one table saying that if they consider the fourth at some point, which means the fourth should be the last to be considered. But we have forgotten that if 20% of diesel is being cut off from the diesel consumption here, something significant will happen. We might call it lighting. But don't forget that according to the statement that operating a 24 hours production, which means there will be something day and night inside. And there will be no lights, there will be no, if there's no light in the night, the operation system, and it should be very high illuminating light that will enhance the work in the night.
The lumens have to be high. Where are they?
So I believe if the upgrading of variable speed motors, because if you are using 25 kilowatts of motor that has no inverter, you will consume more. Then by the time you introduce inverter, engineers in the house, I believe the consumption will reduce. It will reduce. So which means upgrading that can help us. Upgrading that to speed motors can help us to reduce the consumption first. And the higher the load on the generator set, the higher the diesel consumption. So I think, though we might look at the investment and the saving, estimated annual savings, might look somehow, but we can start from the major problem, which is diesel consumption of that. By the time we reduce that, then we can now talk of heat recovery system. Because if we don't do that, there are some times when we install heat recovery system and we don't consider cutting down the diesel consumption, there will still be issues. Because the more, if you put this heat system recovery on the current situation of the diesel they are consuming, there will still be more diesel consumption.
Yeah.
If you put water waste system reuse installation on that same diesel, there will still be high diesel consumption, which means it will be more disastrous for the company, and the impact will be very, very hard.
Okay, so with these few points of yours,
I believe that if upgrading to variable speed motors can be initiated first, just to reduce the load on the generator sets, I think the diesel consumption will be. And while they are doing that, not considering the estimated capex for solar hybrid, we can cut down 20% of diesel alongside, and why they consider other ones.
thank you, Samuel. Please. The case study was carefully designed to ensure that we would have differing opinions in class. And it was designed that way. You will notice that on the environmental impact, there's only one, the solar hybrid one that we spoke about diesel use. It's because I want us to intentionally have these conversations where you would say to me that diesel is what I should prioritize. And some other person who will be an accountant will say to me that it is cost that we should prioritize. Another person will say it's payback period. We'd have the sustainability professional that will say, no, it's CO2 that we should prioritize. You know why? Because it's never straightforward when you are the company. If you would engage all the stakeholders, everybody would have a view, and that's what is happening now. Someone thinks, let's prioritize payback period. That's the measure that we should use to determine the RECP solution we should use. You think, no, the problem we should prioritize is diesel. If we can solve the diesel issue, we've solved a lot of the other issues. There's another person that says, well, if we solve water-related issues, we'll find savings from the number of times now that we'll be servicing the equipment. What all of this is saying is that don't think that when you highlight the solutions, even after you've done an RECP audit, that it's just going to be a stroll in the park to determine what you would ultimately land on, especially when you've got different professionals in the room. You'll notice that I'm not giving you any answer. I've got illustrative answers, but I'm intentionally not putting any illustrative solution on the board, because even if I give you a solution, it would only be illustrative at best. The takeaway from this session is that there's more than one way to skin a cat, and what would ultimately be paramount is how you tie this back to the strategic direction and priority of the company. If a company decides that, you know what, we've got diesel, we personally think diesel is not our problem, that wastewater is our problem. If you like, sermonize about diesel from morning till night. You might have decided that the strategic direction of this company is how to cut down on water. And one of the reasons might be because it's only the water regulatory body that is chasing after the company. Another reason might be that water source that you have is depleted. And so for you, it's prioritizing solving water that is going to be the priority for your company. And so this isn't necessarily saying to you that there's a wrong or right solution. What's wrong or right will be dependent on the company's strategic priority. With these few words of mine, I hope I've been able to, you don't look convinced, but I'm insisting that I've convinced you that it really comes down to what's important for the company. If there's any takeaway you should take from this, it's not the answer to this particular problem, because I don't think this is the problem in your own company. The takeaway should be, how do I ensure that we present, our argument in a way that aligns to the ultimate strategic priority of the company, and in a way that helps us get the funding that we want.
Now we're conserving water, fresh water resource by 40%. But even the cost of biodiversity loss is not captured. Because you're going to have thermal pollution, you're going to have physicochemical parameters pollution from the wastewater. And that's going to lead to biodiversity loss of the diversity of both plants and animals. So habitat environment meanwhile it's not captured. So those are the environmental perspectives.
Okay. Economic Forum report that says that about 50% of the global GDP is highly or moderately dependent on biodiversity. The easiest way to explain this to you is that forests, for example, are supposed to be natural sinks for CO2 emission. So you will find that nature finance or biodiversity professionals will typically say that nature and climate are inextricably linked. What they mean is this: the Amazon forest is one of the biggest sinks of carbon in the world. But the more you cut down the Amazon forest, the more CO2 that goes up into the atmosphere. The more CO2 that goes up into the atmosphere, the more physical risk like wildfire and flooding that would happen. And the more that happens, the more the Amazon forest keeps going depleted. The more it keeps getting depleted, the more carbon goes into the atmosphere, the more physical risk continues. And so that cycle continues. That's why they say biodiversity and climate are inextricably linked. Thank you. So now that we've done problem statements and solution statements, it's time to move on to what we would call market and regulatory context. Now, the challenge though with doing market and regulatory context in the class is that you need a lot of research materials, right, to be able to properly write out the market and regulatory context. And so because of that, and because we have just a few minutes to spend with each other, what we'll do is to combine both market and regulatory context with implementation plan and timeline. But here's what I'll say: do not spend too much time on the market context. If you're someone that is familiar with the textile industry, or someone that is familiar with the solutions that you landed on, you can incorporate, whatever you know about, for example, the solution that you selected. So if you, for example, selected solar, you can tell us, the current landscape, solar landscape and solar deployment landscape. You can talk about that on your own table group. But do not spend too much time on it. What I want you to really spend time on is the implementation plan and timeline. Remember, we said for implementation plan and timeline, 3 things are important. The first is that you've got to think about, are we going to do this thing internally, or are we going to call external engineers or external parties to support us on this? The next thing is that this textile company, do we think that they've got the kind of site or location to help us deploy the solution we want to deploy? And we also want to think about whether we will train our staff. Those 2 things will now come together and ultimately come up with a timeline. A timeline, for example, the person that says that they want to do wastewater recovery, I believe, that person can say, oh, the equipment, we will bring it in, like my daddy there wanted to bring it in from Germany. So that person will talk about the time it will take for you to bring it from Germany down to Nigeria. You will not just say we will buy it 1 month. You have to think that Suez Canal can get blocked for 1 month. And so part of what you should be doing is to be putting in buffer timeline into this. When you bring it down, don't forget that you would have time to install it. You would have time to test it. After testing it, you might need to train staff. So all of those things, based on the solution that you've landed on, you come up with a timeline. Some of you can say you can do everything in 1 month. Another person can say it will take us 5 months. But those 5 months, you have to split it into what we will do, how we will do it, which people will be responsible and be accountable for doing each of these things. I'll give you 15 minutes to get this done, and by 10 minutes to 1, we'll come back to debrief. Thank you.
It's not the action.
Bringing in the equipment, find the space where there's store.
Start with this thing. All right, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me, start by telling me the most challenging part of the work, right? Because we're not only going to talk about what's easy to do, we also should talk about what's most challenging when you're working on an implementation plan. And I'll be honest with you, in Lagos as well, every table that I wanted to select during implementation plan, almost every single table said, no, don't start with us. And it kind of goes to show me why most business plans that I've seen usually lacks an implementation plan. Because to be honest, it's not easy and straightforward. And a lot of times, there are a lot of assumptions that go into it. Right? But you see, there's something called, even when you're valuing a company, what you do is that you make assumptions. What the auditor does is to test the reasonableness of the underlying assumption. As long as you make reasonable assumptions, you're fine. All right, so let's get started. I'm sorry, sir. Let's the class. Yes. Okay.
From our case study,
Yeah.
after brainstorming,
Sorry, can you guys hear it?
we were able to identify most of the problems. But here, the site readiness and space happen to be the most challenging issue here.
Right.
Because you need to expand more in order to incorporate the incoming equipment for the heat recovery. Now, in the implementation plan and timeline, we are able to make use of internal and external engineers. From the metrics table, the two measures we considered, they were on high cost and high impact. So based on that, to avoid any mistakes from the installation, we made use of the external engineers along with the internal capabilities we are making use of. Then, from the importation of the machine from China, approximately it takes 3 months. So, to avoid, we added 1 month buffer,
Right.
making it 4 months.
Right.
Then, from the site preparation, we are already preparing those sites within the same time frame.
Yeah.
We are waiting for the importation.
Right.
Also, for the preparation of the site, it took us 1 month to prepare the site.
Right. But that's still embedded within the 3 months that you're waiting for.
Then the installation of the machines, it took us 1 month. Then test running of the machines and training. The training has to be on-the-job training because the equipment has to be on duty. It has to be an operation so that the training course will go in very well.
Right.
So these are the few things we are able to cover within the 6 months. Though we made it that it will take us 6 months, but with our brainstorming and agreement, it will fall in within 5 months and 2 weeks.
5 months and 2 weeks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please give them a round of applause. So, this is a very gentle and soft-spoken man. For site preparation, they said while they are waiting for the plant, for the equipment to get here to Anambra, they would already start their site preparation. So they are not going to waste any time, right? And so that will take about a month for them to complete. And when they're done with that, they would also test run the equipment, and they want the equipment to be in operation. Did I capture your points? Nice. All right. The one thing they didn't tell me is that who exactly will be responsible for each of these steps that you're talking about. For example, who will be responsible for liaising with the Chinese folks? Would it be finance team? Would it be the procurement team? Would it be procurement and engineering? Which people will be responsible? Critical for you to include in your implementation plan. All right.
Equipment with high impact. We looked at the equipment with the high cost and high impact.
All right.
And we chose the heat recovery device. Yeah. And we said that we're going to use both internal and external technical people. Pre-implementation, we invite consultants who will make presentation to us, and then we'll look at the cost of implementation, because even the estimate here, or estimated cost here is 70 million. It won't be bad if we do it at 50 million. It won't be bad if we do it at 50 million. So we'll look at we'll have different consultants make their presentation, we'll make our choice. And of course, their presentation should give us the best equipment possible, that's going to be cost effective. And then part of the pre-implementation process will be we engaging the...
Please, we need your protection.
So the implementation plan will be engaging the OEM.
Yeah.
Because we're not buying off the shelf.
Original equipment
manufacturers. Okay, so yeah, we'll engage the OEM. Again, our choice of OEM will depend on after sales service or technical support. Okay, because we know that some countries will have, once they give you equipment, you're your own. Okay, so we'll look at those who give us cheaper in costs and getting technical support. Haven't done that.
So you're balancing affordability and support.
Support, yes. Then the next will be, of course, once we have engaged with them, the site thing, they will give us the size of the infrastructure where it will be installed. Then we'll equally put into consideration the timeline between when they will be through. First is how long will it take to get the equipment fabricated? Then the shipment. And then we'll consider equally that when it arrives in Nigeria, our ports are usually not the best for, so we put all of the time, we'll give this time.
You don't have people at the port. You look like someone that will
most times you have people at the port, no man. Just all of vessels queuing for, to buy.
We can't even put that one inside our business.
No.
We know people inside.
Okay, so time of clearing, getting to site, installation period, commissioning period, we say at least maximum of commissioning to test with 6 months, within which time we will train our staff. Okay, so I think that's where, anything I missed out?
You're going to bring Mr. Governor to do the commissioning?
Well, they will come. They, most times they send their technical people down here. And then, of course,
Because you look like someone that will know somebody in a governor's office.
the other costs, we just talked about estimated costs.
Yeah.
There are other antecedent costs that we have not factored in. Cost of infrastructure, the base. When you bring in these people from the country, wherever it's coming from, Turkey, Germany, wherever, there's a cost attached to it.
Charge you out of pocket
expenses.
And those people, maybe you will not put them inside this hotel where
No way. You provide a convoy of security. It was a 5-star hotel. Anyway, and of course, most times cost of visa, immigration issues and all of that. So put all
you
of
see
that.
that you are very thorough in this your own analysis. So you said all of these things will take how many months? 6.
No, beyond 6 months.
How many?
I would say 18 months.
18 months.
18 months.
All right, so it looks like we have on one side, it will take just 5 months, 2 weeks. On the other side, it will take 18 months. Is there anybody that is in between those two extremes?
We'll open a letter of credit, remember?
LC
for that.
Mention that.
Yes, letter of credit.
Because there is a banker here that is trying to sell.
There's no dollar in CBN.
That's why he says LC has to enter this area. You didn't tell you to collect bank guarantee. Sorry, sir. Samuel.
Okay. Our own is the month actually is even below 5.
It's like a
no stress.
What equipment? Yeah, let's start.
What we are going for is upgrading to variable speed motor.
All right.
And but going by this, we realize that since it will have the cost is not much actually, and the way we are doing it, we don't want to go abroad because of some
buy Nigeria, grow the naira.
Import substitution.
Import issues and even delay from port and on the rest, so that we can fasten up our operations very well. So we will be sourcing it locally, and the essence is from here. We'll source it here.
In Onitsha here.
Even
We are actually fabricating it.
So any parts that need to be fabricated, we do everything here. So that the reason doing it here is for us to monitor what they are actually doing, whether it's in line with what we want, so that it can help us. And going by that, it will also help us, even if there is any issue after isolation, the post-implementation, we can consult back as fast as possible. No flight.
No need soldiers.
We are reducing cost on that. So, and the fabrication and everything, the sourcing will take like 2 months, and after that, the movement to the site. Although motor does not need too much space. Although while we are sourcing, we'll have invited those regulatory bodies involved to see whether to help us read whether the impact will be much on the environment, because we are upgrading actually. So while we are sourcing, they'll be doing all that one underground, so that we avoid their issues even after installation. So that one will take the movements after sourcing to the location will take like 1 week. Then installation, now it will be hybrid, because it will be in-house. We can engineer within, and the external one. They can help us. That one will take like 2 weeks to install. And we also train our staff, because we have to train them on how to go about it, which will take like 2 weeks. Then we test run 1 week.
2 weeks.
After that, after test running, there's something that needs to come after, which is post-implementation review, before you can kickstart the operation fully. So by then, we can use 1 week to do that, which in total can be 2 months and 3 weeks.
2 months, 3 weeks.
And the officer responsible for the purchases the procurement officers and the accounting officers can help us collaborate and get it done, while the installation will be for the engineers.
Please give Samuel a round of Samuel says that he wants to avoid foreign exposure to foreign exchange risk. Says he wants to buy Nigeria and grow the Naira. And as such, he has decided to do it just very nearby at Abaye. Right? And he also told us who will be responsible for what. He spoke about like the procurement team. He spoke about the role of the engineering team. And he also spoke about post-implementation review that will take only 1 week. And in total, for him, it will take 2 months, 3 weeks. Like you disagree with that 2 months. You even called it again. All right. So let me ask everybody one question. As we are implementing all of these things, do we recall that GreenWeaves Textiles Limited operates a 24-hour production line? How have we factored in the continuous operation of the production line in every single one of these our implementation plans? Because if you are the CEO, you would not want the operating line to stop, because you likely have orders that are already on ground. For example, the person that wants to use 18 months to do their project, how have they factored in the continuous running of the plant in the deployment of their solution? I do not pretend to have an answer to that. I just intentionally eat that 24-hour operating plan in there for you to know that as you are thinking about whatever solution you want to deploy, whether it will come from China or from Turkey, I don't know where you want to get Turkish lira, whether it's from Cotonou or from Aba, you've got to think about the operation of the business. As consultants, you should not write plans in isolation. Don't write your own plan. Write a plan that factors in the operation of the company. Too many times, we will give consultants jobs. And because we ourselves don't know what the problem is, and we haven't built the business case ourselves, the consultants will do one thing. They will go and write their own plan. The consultant will also miss out this very critical element that we run a 24-hour operating line. So the consultant can come to you with a very fancy looking document, 100 pages. The financial plan will talk to the business plan. The implementation plan will be there. Everything will be there. And we'll just miss one thing. But this one thing might be the most critical part of your operation. So, as you think about writing a plan, you've got to think about it holistically. Don't think about, now we're writing, problem statement separate from solution statement. But you have to have that bird-eye view as you write your plan. That takes me back to what we started with. That whatever solution you land on must tie back to the strategic vision and the strategic goal of the company. Are we fine? All right. So we will move on because our plan is not complete. Even though we have the implementation plan, we know what the problem is, we have a solution, we've done market research, or actually, you gave the market research to a consultant like me to go and do it for you. Market research is actually not too expensive. So the only amount I will charge you for that one is about 100 million. $100,000. 100,000 naira. 100,000 naira. 100,000 naira. How much do you think the tickets from Toronto is to Lagos before now flying down to your plant, how much do you think it will cost? 1.5 million naira.
I'm not talking about visa.
You can enter attachment.
No, I actually don't even need a visa because I'm coming home. So I'm Nigerian and I can come. But even when I'm going back, I don't need a visa as well. So don't worry about visa cost. You think 1.5 million naira will get me from Toronto down to Aba? You see now why I'm charging you 100 million naira. Because you don't expect a consultant of my pedigree to even fly economy class. A consultant of my pedigree, when they give me money to fly, when they give me ticket money to fly economy, you know what I do? I upgrade it myself. Because it's in business class that I'll find people that will pay me 500 million naira. So when they pay me money to fly economy, and I'm shading them now, what I do is to go and upgrade my tickets. So I can find people like my Oga that knows governors in business class. All right, so we'll move on to funding strategy now. Because now that we know the problem, we know the solution, we have an implementation timeline. We've gotten to that particular place where BUI has been waiting for you to come and tell them how much you need so that they can count the money sharp and give it to you. Don't forget though that funding strategy is not the same as financial metrics. Financial metrics helps to talk about our funding strategy. So part of the thing you've got to do is to decide, the person that wants to do 2 months, 2 weeks, do you want to go and raise debt or do you want to raise equity? If you raise debt, do you have a place where they will give you all the money, or would you have to find different sources of the fund to even raise the debt? Will you be going to that my auntie right there to collect money from a commercial bank? Or is BOI? As BOI promised you that they can give you all the money that you need. But you can be like my daddy. His company has a lot of money. They can decide that they've got a lot of profits, like the banks declared this year, 1 trillion naira. PBT. That's how they were declaring it. And they will now say the PBT as if we should be afraid that 1 trillion is not already a lot of money. They say it's PBT. In 2014, when I audited First Bank Holdings, their profit was 120 billion naira, and it felt like a lot of money. Now, all of us in this room that do business, we do not want to have the same profit we had in 2015 as the same profit we have today. So my problem with the bankers is not that they are declaring 1 trillion naira profits. It's not a problem. I think you should keep declaring it. The problem I have with the environment generally is that while the banks are declaring big profits, the manufacturing companies are not only operating at a loss, they are carrying their bags and they are giving the country. So I wonder what the bankers are doing to make 1 trillion naira when the primary goal of a bank is to provide money to the users of capital. So my commercial bank auntie has said, Olu, point at BOI. BOI said, point at commercial bank. But this is typical of bankers. But this class is not about how well the banks are doing or how poorly the manufacturing companies are doing. We said yesterday that there's now an opportunity to take part of that money to deploy towards our RECP project, such that maybe by next year we'll not just be saying 1 trillion naira profit, PBT, we'll be saying a lot more because there's an opportunity, there's a funding opportunity here. All right, so we will take the next 15 minutes to do 2 things. we will talk about our funding strategy, but we will also now incorporate the risk and mitigation strategy into it. Remember the problem that you identified, remember the solution that you identified, remember your implementation plan, and that should inform some of the risk that you will incorporate. For example, the people that are going abroad to source it. What if there is FX issue? For example, if you go and buy it from China and you order it around December, there will be Chinese holiday in January. So you have to factor that into, you put that into consideration. That maybe we should either order it after the Chinese holiday, or we should just factor that thing into our timeline. So I'm telling you practical things. I'm not saying, you notice that I'm not just calling it financial risk, because that's what we will tell you in theory. I'm telling you the practical challenges that you might face. All right, so 15 minutes, let's talk about funding strategy. And here's what I want you to say for funding strategy. You can assume, like you have the right to assume that you will find the money internally. But I think that if you find the money internally, you will not come to this training. It's because you want to collect money from bank. So how do you intend to source the money? Is it from debt or from equity? I suspect you want to collect debt, and I just suspect. Do you think one bank will give you all the money, or would you have to go to 2 banks? In your own case, you might even say that I know a grant somewhere that we can go and collect. That's what you should do with funding strategy. And the other element is list out maybe 3, just 3 risks. But remember, we only don't list out risk. We have to include mitigation strategy. I want that risk to be practical. Don't just write technical risk. I want you to say the exact technical risk that you suspect that you will face. For example, the people that want to do make to order. You know, what if they miss out something? The people that want to buy off the shelf, what if that thing doesn't fit exactly what you want? Include both of those considerations as you write down your risk and your mitigation strategy. 15 minutes.